Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're going to Detroit, USA right now. We're bringing on Carrie Majeske from the great and worldwide iconic brand Ford. Welcome to Green is Good, Carrie.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. You're the manager of sustainable and safety engineering, Carrie. How did you ever become the manager of sustainable and safety engineering at this amazing brand Ford? Tell us a little bit about the journey. Did you grow up from a little girl dreaming to become a sustainability and safety engineering manager?
I wish I could say that I did. I don't think I could have plotted this path if I had to.
Okay.
But I'm very old, so I told you this is a pretty long story. I'll
Let me hear it. I want to hear it, and I want our listeners to hear it, because there's so many other young ladies across the world that listen to this show, and truly, this is about inspiration and education, so I want them to hear your journey.
Great. Well, I started as an engineering student. I graduated from the University of Michigan in 1984. That'll give you an idea of my age. And at that point, I don't honestly know if we had defined the term sustainability. And I came into the company knowing that I wasn't going to necessarily do nuts and bolts engineering forever, but I knew I needed that experience. So I went into suspension design. I did my early engineering work in truck product development, working on suspensions for trucks. And that sort of segued into, I went from very specific to pretty much more general as I went over time. So I moved into more program management, business strategy, regulatory plans. At one point I had a really cool job. It was the Women's Marketing and Product Office, where we were trying to figure out tools and processes for people to think about the vehicle from a woman's perspective. You know, can you get in and out of a car without chipping your nails? Can you get in and out of a truck with a tighter skirt on, ingress, egress? And we're basically trying to help the product development engineers design our vehicles so that women would want to buy them, because we knew at that point, and we still know, that women influence about 80% of the vehicle purchases.
Wow.
So anyway, that was a really cool job. I also spent some time in battery electric vehicle as a chief engineer, and that was in the 90s when it wasn't quite ready, 80s and 90s, and a little bit of work in fuel cell engineering and those programs. And then the segue into this position was from a planning job where I was looking at future fuel economy, safety, and emissions regulations, and making sure that our incoming products had met all the phase-ins and all the very complex regulations, so getting the right content into future programs. And from there, I started working on what's now our global CO2 glide path that's aligned with stabilization at 450 ppm in the atmosphere, which is what we think climate scientists think is a reasonable level of CO2 in the atmosphere to mitigate climate change. And it was with that work, I was working with a group of people much smarter than I, who had powertrain experience and fuels experience and modeling tools, and we came up with our what's now our blueprint for sustainability. And that's when my boss said, okay, now you've been in the product development world, we're trying to take sustainability to the next level, and we want to integrate it into the rest of the company. It's going from being a public affairs thing and a reputational thing to driving the business. So asked me to join this team, and I have been working on product sustainability initiatives ever since.
That is awesome. And that was back around 2007 where that all happened?
Yeah, that was a really kind of a critical turning point for the company, and I was happy to be maintained as a part of it. So we've come a long way from there, and at that point, not only did our product portfolio take hold, but the business piece was given the right attention too, and that's, I think, why I'm here to talk to you today. Is we've kind of hit our stride, and all's going well.
Yeah, and for our listeners out there that want to follow along more than just listening to Carrie and what she's doing over at Ford, you can go to two great websites. First, you can go to the core website, www.ford.com. But of course, on this issue, and to learn more about sustainability and the sustainability journey that Ford is on, you go to media.ford.com. Media www.ford.com, and there's a great section on innovation and sustainability and all the great things that Carrie and her team are doing at the wonderful brand Ford. Carrie, let's get into it a little bit now. And I'm on the website, so I have the fun of being on the website and talking with you at the same time. Talk a little bit about one of your most iconic brands, the Ford F-150, and what's going on innovative right now with the F-150 that you want to share with our listeners out there.
The F-150 has been a great product for many years. Hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year we sell, and what we're talking about today is just one small innovation that can have a much bigger difference in the long run, which is it's a wiring harness bracket that it's rice hull instead of petroleum in the plastic. So we've taken something that was 100% petroleum based and now infused a renewable resource that displaces some of that petroleum. And so 10% of the material is rice hull, 25% is recycled polypropylene, and 65% is still virgin polypropylene. But what this does, when we do these kinds of things, is just sort of pilot a new material, something that's grown, not a scarce natural resource. Sometimes it can be cost effective. Sometimes it can be we wouldn't do it if it wasn't cost parity with the outgoing material. Sometimes these kinds of materials can offer weight safe. So it's small part, a little bit of renewable material, but when you multiply that by hundreds of thousands of vehicles, it makes a difference.
It does, but when we start thinking about, now I had never heard of that part before you ever brought that up, and but how many, when you talk about little steps that on a journey that then little steps in the right direction that lead up to big changes, how many parts go into a car, and how do you deconstruct a car from where you stand as the manager of sustainability and safety engineering, and then decide which parts you think you have opportunities to change, like you've changed this part?
Well, it's kind of bottom up, top down.
Yeah.
We don't say I want to change that wiring harness bracket. It's kind of we pretty much, from a sustainable material side, we set aside the metals. That metals are recyclable. We need them. We're lightweighting with different metals, but set aside the metals. We look mostly at the plastics and the non-metallic stuff, and then our wonderful partners in the supply base are also important to this journey. They are the ones that bring these initiatives forward. They've done, by the time they bring them to us, they've done some of the early screening work, and then we find the right application with our research folks, do the diligence in terms of development, because we're not going to do anything that compromises the performance of these products. And then once we know we have a product that performs in a business case, we go forward, and generally, if it's something a little bit more innovative, we'll start small and then migrate over time to more applications as we know we've got a good deal all the way around. So
on the metal side, traditionally, what metals go into a car? Because I'm a layman, I really don't know this thing. I just know my car key starts a car and I go. But help me with what metals are traditionally the metals, and how you evolve that to be lighter and stronger and create a more sustainable car.
Yeah, well, it's basically steel, cast iron, high-strength steel, aluminum. As we get more aggressive with weight, some magnesium. So a lot of different kinds of metals. And we do, we're focusing, we have big weight challenges because weight is really how you get to fuel efficiency, and fuel efficiency is really the biggest environmental impact we can make. So that's our number one priority. Where lightweighting is concerned, we've done some things that are really innovative in terms of downsizing and boosting our engines. So you lightweight the vehicle so you can use a smaller engine, so you can lightweight other parts of the vehicle. So there's sort of an iterative impact there. And with the metals, we are obviously looking from a system and figuring out where can we use high-strength steel, aluminum more strategically to take big chunks of weight out of the vehicle. then allow us to use smaller engines and get better fuel economy.
And for our listeners who just joined us, we've got Carrie Majeske on. She's the Manager of Sustainable and Safety Engineering at the great brand Ford. And to follow along online like I am, you could go to media.ford.com. Carrie, what other environmental friendly materials are you developing and going to be featuring in your Ford cars and trucks now and in the future that will make your vehicles more sustainable?
Well, one of our biggest successes, a lot of people aren't aware of, is soy-based seat foams. We were approached by the soybean board, which had an excess of soy, and they came to our research team and they said, we really want to do something with soy. They found a way to displace, again, petroleum in our seat foams, and it took a lot of development, a lot of iterations, a lot of work to get it to perform right, to not have any odor, to not degrade over time. And they have now, we now have about 10% soy-based foams in all of our cars and trucks we produce in North America. We also have about 75% of our headrests have the same soy foam, and then we've got a headliner, which is the sort of the inside of the roof material that also on our Ford Escape is featuring the soy foam. So right now, from that, the applications of soy foam, we're diverting about 5 million pounds of petroleum a year from the application of that foam, and that reduces CO2 emissions by about 20 million pounds annually. So, tailpipe emissions improving fuel economy reduces tailpipe emissions in the use phase of our vehicles, but this is a way we can also have an impact on CO2 emissions in the materials phase of the life cycle.
How long did it take for you to develop that? And then after you've proven success, and this year you're at 5 million pounds displacement, how does that grow over time in terms of the use of the product after you find success?
Yeah, well, I think the plan is to continue to see how much more soy we can use, and so we'll go from 10% to maybe 15, 20%, 25.
Right.
I don't know how far they'll be able to push that limit, but yeah, the idea is now that we've migrated it all across the product lines and gotten all the volume we can, then go higher in terms of percent of the foam.
Right.
So there's possibilities. Nothing.
How long does that take? How long does that whole R&D
right now to announce along those lines? But the other thing, there's more materials. We're also experimenting with things like wheat straw. We've used as a plastics reinforcement in a cargo bin in a rear of the Flex vehicle, and that one, good news. It was a good application, performed well. Couldn't get quite to the cost that we needed, so that one didn't go forward. So we're not going to just go ahead and do this in volume if it's really not a good total business case.
Right.
We're also using cellulose, which is sort of wood pulp, as a plastics reinforcer that's about to be in more of our products. Coconut. There's a couple different applications of coconut, sort of grounding up the shell and using that as a plastics reinforce is one way. The coir, or the sort of hairy stuff on the outside of the coconut, for lack of a better word, has been used in a trunk liner application, like behind the carpet. So a lot of these things aren't visible because customers wouldn't necessarily like the way they looked. They're behind the scenes right now. But there's a lot of things in there. And then there's some other applications that we're just kind of toying with right now. There's some sustainable rubber from dandelions that's potentially could be introduced if we get to the point where it's ready. We a fun one. We're doing a lot of different recycled content too. I've been talking about the renewables or the things you grow, but we also have a recycled application where they take retired U.S. currency, so you get chunks, stacks of dollar bills or $100 bills, and otherwise they would be incinerated or put into a landfill, which none of those are good options. But linen has really good material properties, so as a reinforcement in plastic, it has a potential. And they're looking at it as a first application for a coin tray, which would be kind of a cute
That is amazing. So wait a second now. I want to step back here. This is one of the greatest brands in the world, Ford is, that you get to work with. And so, as opposed to some of the coolest brands that were developed in America of recent times or in the United States out of Silicon Valley, like an Apple iPhone, you're really doing, though, some very cool things on an industrial level behind the scenes there. And like you said, some of them are very very invisible. How does explain to our audience the cool things you're doing that many of them never get to see, both in finished product or even in process. But how does that work? How do you inspire both innovation at Ford internally, but also externally with your vendors?
Well, the internal answer, there's a very talented team of research scientists in our labs whose just their whole mission in life is to take stuff that would otherwise be wasted or grown and find applications that make sense in our products. That's what they do, and they love it, and they're very good at it. They're very bright engineers and researchers, but they also have an eye to the sustainability piece of it.
Right.
And as far as the supply base goes, everybody's looking for an edge and a hook. It's competitive industry, competitive to be in our supply chain, and we need innovators. And so two suppliers come to us with the same part. One has renewable content, the other doesn't, and they're the same performance, same cost. You got an edge if you're the guy who brings us an innovative part. And they want to do good too. I think people want to do good. That's what we're finding within Ford is I know the practitioners all over the company who are just out there doing their otherwise mundane jobs, but also trying to do them to make the world a better place. And that makes it exciting, and it gives us some of the innovations that have just happened.
Yeah.
With obviously the support of the bigger company structure around it. So.
And I'm on your site, and I'm looking at I'm looking at this beautiful rectangle with one of your vehicles in it, and it's Blueprint for Sustainability 2012 and 13. And around this vehicle, you have a lot of different arrows, and it goes to vehicle safety, supply chain, people, water, climate change, and financial health. Why don't you do an overview, if you can, Carrie, and it's on some of your favorite topics as to what is Ford doing in some of these other areas, because sustainability truly is holistic, and it's a journey. It's not an all or nothing, and it's not a kill shot. We all know that. So if you could just share some of the sustainability journey on some of those other topics, it'd be wonderful for our listeners to hear the inspirational things you're doing there in those areas.
Okay. Well, and I'm looking at the same page. So this is the electronic, if you will, cover of our latest sustainability report. And I will do a plug. This is the 14th report that we've issued. The first ones were much different, very, get our toe in the water. But we've, over time, really done a better and better job of being transparent about what we're doing and how we're doing it and where our challenges are and where our successes are, and having some measurable, accountability for what we're doing. So this is the summary. It starts, the reporting process starts with a materiality assessment, which basically says, what's the most important and what's the biggest challenge, and we need to be working on the most important things that are our biggest challenges. Biggest challenges that don't have any impact, okay, that'll take care of itself. But so that's what ends up in the report. And climate change in the environment is probably the biggest one here. But everything on this page represents one of the materiality issues for us. So just to give you the highlights, the climate change I mentioned, we have a glide path around 450 ppm, which is the climate scientists' accepted level of concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere to limit the rise in temperature to 2 degrees. We have so that glide path is our fleet average CO2 emissions out of the tailpipe that we need to hit over the long haul. This number will go out to the year 2200 if we're all around that long.
Right.
And we know kind of where we need to be, and we are regularly calibrating our product plans to know that we have our fleet average declining at the rate that it needs to contribute to that climate strategy. Now, that's our product. Obviously, we have operations that have energy and CO2 emissions. We also are working on substantial improvements in the emissions from our facilities and our operations, which, oh, by the way, generally when you reduce energy, that's also a good business case. So a lot of the things we're doing tie into the business and the environment.
Right.
Moving around the circle here, financial health is clear. If we're not in business to do any good, we won't do any good.
Right.
We have to look at our overall financial health and profitability, and we do report on that, and I won't go into the details.
Right.
You can find them all over the web.
Right.
Vehicle safety is something we will never compromise. We're always pushing forward on not just meeting the regulations, but looking at the customer safety features, things like inflatable rear seat belts that were a recent innovation that are, nobody mandated that. It's just another way to keep someone safe. Supply chain, we clearly can have impact in our own space, but by virtue of the massive supply chain that we work with, we are trying to share the learnings on human rights, on energy and environment with our supply chain, so that not only are we doing good things, but we are helping them to have the same standards and the same practices, and we're learning from them and they're learning from us, and we work very carefully with our supply chain to do that. People is obviously where this all starts, and so we do have some reporting on who our people are and where they are and what we're up to, and I think we've got a pretty happy workforce. Probably there's always room to improve there, and I think you'll probably see some more diligence in reporting on the people side over time in the report. And then water is not new, but clearly the water scarcity and water quality are becoming more and more at the forefront. People around here say, yeah, we've been worrying about climate change, but that'll take hundreds of years to get to us. Water won't take that long if we really aren't careful with it. So we're embarking on a corporate global water strategy that starts to look at how do we reduce water usage in our facilities, and how do we consider it when we do things like alternative fuels, and even in the manufacturing, what are we doing about water quality and water scarcity in the places where we operate. So those are the highlights of what we talk about in the report. Like I said, you can mill around that report online forever and not read everything. It's more than 500 pages of information, and we use this as our inventory within the company as well. So it's our, how do we communicate all the good stuff with our employees so we can be the ambassadors for the company too.
But like you said, when it comes to water, just as a highlight, I was just reading another fact online. You cut global water use 8.5% per vehicle. That adds up.
It does. When you're building millions of vehicles a year. So can be a lot of water. That
adds up. We're down to the last couple of minutes or so, and I want to sort of switch topics, Carrie. Of course, Ford is doing amazing things, but I want to also talk about leadership. And leadership as, you and I are of the same generation. And when we were graduating college, it was a much different world, as we know, not only with regards to sustainability, but for also leadership opportunities. And here you are in 2013, a leader of a very important issue at a very big and important brand. When Ford makes a move in sustainability, the needle truly moves. And here you are as a manager of sustainable and safety engineering. And recently, we see this whole movement led by some of the more, some of the new leaders on the West Coast of the .com era, the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world, and those folks of this whole lean in and women leadership. In the last couple minutes, can you share some thoughts? Because we have young people in the United States and actually around the world, because after we air on Sirius, we actually are uploaded on the iTunes network, and we track our thousands and thousands of downloads around the world. There's a lot of young women out there that want to become the next Carrie Majeske. Can you? No, seriously. I'm being serious.
That's scary.
No, but I mean, you broke through before it was okay or cool to break through. What pearls of wisdom can you now share backwards with the next generation on how to be a leader and how to effectuate change in whatever they want to do?
Wow, I don't think I'm a very simple person. I don't consider myself overly bright, but I'm bright. But I like to keep things simple. I mean, I came into the company, as I mentioned, and I got a good, solid academic background. I didn't mention it, but I have an MBA out of the University of Michigan as well. So education is important. You don't have to know coming out of the chute what you want to do. I think I have kind of let it happen, and I've never managed my career. I've always tried to do my job, and wherever the job I was, I've tried to understand how it fits into the bigger picture and maybe where it would take me. But like I said, you do your job. I've always wanted to do things that I felt were important. I've always wanted to work for people that had integrity and cared about people. So I keep it very simple. Do what you like to do. Ultimately, I believe everybody else will do what they like to do. Doesn't matter where they are. They're going to do what they like to do. So find that place, get a good education, take care of the people around you, the people that work for you, the people that you work for, and set your sights on just taking the next step. You don't have to fix everything today. Just take the next step in the right direction. As far as sustainability goes, I'm just joining the Herb Advisory Board, and the Herb is a program at the University of Michigan between the School of Natural Resources and the business school, Ross Business School. And that program is just amazing, and it's attracting people who have already done way more in their lives than I ever will. And they're young people who now want the education around it. So there are some really cool programs like that in sustainability that can kickstart you. But frankly, I'm not sure we know yet how we're going to harness those people within a corporate framework as they come into our space. And we do have some students coming in that are just amazing, and they have the better education than I had and a head start. But they also then have to be grounded in the business. If you work for a company or even a nonprofit, know your business and do the right thing.
Awesome. And thank you for your time today, Carrie Majeske. You are just, really wonderful. And thanks for spending time with us. For our listeners out there, go to media.ford.com. Carrie Majeske, you're an inspiring sustainability leader and truly living proof that green is good.